South African consumers have until the end of this week to comment on amendments to the National Liquor Policy. The Department of Trade and Industry is proposing amendments to the policy which will place responsibility on bars, restaurants and other alcohol-serving establishments for the actions of intoxicated patients. Simon Colman, underwriting executive of SHA Specialist Underwriters, joins me now to discuss this and how South African businesses are going to be affected by this. I mean, 500 meters away from a school, residential area, places of public transportation, it doesn't leave a lot of places for these places for businesses to actually set themselves up, does it?
Well, there's that, and of course a lot of those businesses have been in those areas for many years prior to this coming out. So, and that's why it's so important that the public comment on this. Business owners need to get together. If there's an association governing, say, hotels or restaurants, they should be going with one voice and commenting on the legislation. Is very important.
Has there been a take-up of that commentary then? I mean, well, like we said, end of this week, time is running out, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it was extended by a month, and that would tell me that there wasn't a lot of comment initially, and I'm sure the Department of Trade and Industry is quite eager to engage with business owners. So let's hope that, in fact, I think it closes off tomorrow on the 13th, so it needs to be sorted out now.
Now, clearly the residential aspect might be one to worry about, because it then brings in the whole aspect of drunk driving, doesn't it? How important and how significant will that be in this entire argument?
Well, look, that for us as liability underwriters is the critical point, because what we're interested in, we insure a lot of businesses against liability claims. And we're really interested in whether or not bars and restaurants are going to be found liable where there's drunken driving. And that's really what this proposed policy says. You know, it says that the establishment would be carrying some responsibility for serving somebody who then gets in their vehicle and causes a road accident, or who goes home and engages in domestic violence or some other alcohol-related crime.
So, I mean, you have that, plus you have the possible closure of that business because of where it currently sits. So, how much work do you think yourselves as insurance underwriters are set to have if this comes into effect?
Look, Arabile, I think it's important that we look at the reason why the Department of Trade and Industry wanted to do this. We've got a problem with alcoholism in South Africa. So the underlying reason for doing it is a noble one. But perhaps it's not been thought out correctly on the impact that it's going to have on businesses. We fashion a lot of our legislation on stuff that happens overseas. So if we look in the US, they operate with something which they call dram shop liability, a dram being an English measure of alcohol. And in the US, in California in particular, they've just recently repealed this legislation. The legislation which would basically allow for an injured person to sue the establishment after they've been injured by a drunk driver who was in that establishment earlier. They've repealed it because it's proven to be practically impossible to enforce. I mean, even when the police arrest somebody for drunken driving, it takes 2 years to get blood alcohol tests. Can we expect bartenders and waitresses to be able to do effective sobriety tests in a restaurant or a bar on a Friday night? I think it's going to be very difficult.
And I mean, at this point in time, does it, you know, we've spoken about how it may not be, it's a noble sort of gesture, so to put it. But, you know, with sin taxes, liquor always goes up. And then when you have this law perhaps coming into effect soon enough, if it does, you can't blame liquor retailers for really feeling marginalized in this economy.
And perhaps for people going, well, you know, you're taking away the accountability or the responsibility of the people that are actually consuming the alcohol, and you're shifting all of it onto what we perceive as an easy target, which is a business with a fixed address and probably deeper pockets that can pay out. I just want to touch on something else. You know, what's really interesting and perhaps makes the whole situation even more absurd. The Road Accident Fund restricts a person's rights to sue the driver of a vehicle that injured them. You can only sue the Road Accident Fund if you're injured in a road accident. So what this legislation would be saying is that I cannot sue the driver who injured me in the road accident, who was drunk and breaking the law, but I can sue the bar that he was drinking in just before he got into his car. needs to be thought about and discussed.
Yeah. Certainly a lot of commentary should be coming through with regards to this bill and how it is going to actually be implemented. So clearly a few loopholes. Simon Colman, underwriting executive at SHA specialist, talking to us about how these liquor policies are said to perhaps be of quite a lot of significance. Let's move abroad now. And Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has spoken for the first time about his country's